Great, let's get started. And we got one question, will this be recorded? Yes, it is recorded. And also letting you know that I know a lot of us will introduce ourselves. We are fully participants and maintainers and contributors and committed to Flux, but just want to make clear that some of us work at Weaveworks, so this online meetup is run by Weaveworks. So hopefully that was clear from the beginning. So in case you didn't know. Great. My name is Tamao Nakahara. I'm VP of Developer Experience at Weaveworks, and I'll be joined here by someone who many of you probably know, Priyanka Ravi, known as Pinky, who is a Developer Experience Engineer here at Weaveworks. And today we'll be talking about Flux v.2.2.0, which is the latest release. Here we're already at 2.2.1, but obviously the major release started with 0, so this is what we'll be covering. As I mentioned, we work at Weaveworks, but we are the creators of the project Flux and Flagger, and we pretty much this developer experience team that I run has been dedicated to that. So we'd love to be helpful here. So a little bit of background if you're new. The company that we work for, like I said, we've been founded on open source. We created Flux that kind of kicked off the coining of the term GitOps as well, which our CEO coined. And then it's kind of taken off from there. We now have a GitOps working group in the CNCF. Pinky and others are active members of that and in other areas. So I'm sure that many of you are here because you are using Flux and you're interested in hearing the latest of the latest release. But just high level, in case you're brand new, welcome. Flux, like I said, and a sub-project is Flagger, are in the CNCF. They are graduated projects. CNCF has sandbox, incubation, and graduated projects. So we are very proud to be part of the small group of graduated projects. Someone was asking for an analogy. Maybe it's like bachelor's, master's, and PhD. So it's kind of like a PhD project. It's met all the requirements, especially the security requirements. We go through regular external security audits. And so that's very important for our enterprise users. And we went through general availability for most of the controllers. Flux is made up of many controllers because it has a microservices architecture. And so most of them that offer the GitOps capability has had general availability. And that is why now, starting this year, there are fewer releases and bigger releases. And that's why this is the first time we've kind of done this larger release with sort of ways that I'll be asking for some feedback on the best way to get the information out for you. I know people who are text-based can look at release notes and blog posts and such. Some people like to join online meetups, and it's really great to see how many people are joining today. So we're glad that we're able to offer this. And thanks to Pinky for being able to prepare this. So Flux is the core of GitOps. And then for that, the sub-project Flagger, if you don't know, was created by Stefan Prodan, one of the main maintainers of Flux, who saw the opportunity to see progressive delivery. So Flagger sits in between Flux and Kubernetes. And so when Flux says, oh, I noticed there's a change in the YAML file, we should kick off GitOps, Flagger will say, well, wait, let's do something like a canary deployment where we can slowly make changes and have the opportunity to roll back if the metrics that we get back from things like Prometheus or Datadog or what have you don't meet the threshold that you set. So that's new for you. Please find out more at fluxcd.io. And Flux and Flagger have fantastic ecosystems, many of which my team and the extended group engineers at Weaveworks work on. For example, we have Weave GitOps, which is a UI for Flux. If you haven't used Flux and Terraform together, you bring the GitOps capabilities to Terraform. We have a Terraform controller. We're also very proud of a VS Code extension that we work on, so you can do GitOps deployments directly from your IDE. We see more and more downloads every month of that, so it's been very popular. We also have one of our engineers has a project called Flamingo, where you can have sort of the Argo front end with Flux backend. That was very popular at KubeCon Chicago. It was something that we weren't making too much noise about because it's something that's one of our engineers works on, but now we have major enterprises who are trusting it and using it. Pinky even gave a talk about it. I think originally it was supposed to be Walmart talking about their use case, so that's pretty exciting. And then Flux and Backstage, there's a lot of work that we've done there, so you can access views of Flux resources and much, much more. You can check out the Flux ecosystem at the Flux website. We've got plenty of ways that Flux is being used with other projects and offerings. And like I said, we are in the CNCF, so many companies help support Flux and Flagger, but we are Weaveworks. If you want to find out more about us, we are weave.works, and you can find out more there. So today, like I said, we'll be talking about the release. Pinky here, that you can see, will be speaking. This will probably be a shorter one, maybe 30 to 45 minutes. It depends on if you have lots of questions. Also, I see that Kingdon is in our audience, who technically is on time off. We're all getting ready for the holidays, but thanks for Kingdon for being there in case you guys have some really deep questions. If not, we also, of course, have our CNCF Slack channel where Hida, one of our maintainers, is there. Hida wanted to join, but it's evening in Europe and there are kids who need their sleep time. So it'll be juggling children and potentially asking if you have especially Helm controller questions, because a lot of what we'll be talking about is the amazing work that Hida and the team have done to improve Helm controller for this release. And earlier we saw that I think the chat is now working, so please make sure to choose to everyone as you're chatting, because these are generally pretty lively and people actually answer each other's questions, so it's really great. So before we get into the details, we would love your feedback on whether Flux communications are working for you, what you can do better. The reason that we brought this up was that, like I said, we have fewer releases now. And so each one, we wanted to make sure that we were doing our absolute best for the Flux community to make sure that people were getting the information that they wanted, the kind of information that they wanted, and at the place that they want to see it. We meet with many companies that use Flux. We love chatting with many of you. If any of you would like to have an hour with us with a Flux maintainer, let us know and we'll set up an hour. We'll just sit there and do whatever you want, troubleshoot, answer questions, what have you. But from many of these meetings and some feedback that people gave us in these meetings was one that sometimes it was a little bit hard to know the context of a release, to know that it was really important to upgrade. Sometimes it's hard to see all the details. They would say, oh, I have this problem. And we'd be like, oh, if you're on the latest version of X controller, then, we've solved that problem. So they were like, oh, that's really good to know. Sometimes it's really hard for me to know why. So one wonderful Flux user told us, it'd be really great if we had more context on the release. Everybody seems to or not everybody, but many people gave feedback that they really combed through the release notes, but maybe having a blog post that gave more context on why to upgrade would be helpful, which then was sort of how to get information. Some people were, it's maybe a standard practice for some projects where the release comes out and the release notes comes out and the blog post might come out a week or two later. We were following that. And of course, yeah, nobody wants a release to get delayed because there's extra work to be done. However, everybody joined forces. Thanks a lot to Hida and everybody who contributed. This is the first time we had a blog post come out simultaneously with the release. It was a lot of work, so we really thank people for that. And the reason we did that was that one person given feedback saying, really great if there was a link coming from the release notes to the blog post. So we wanted to test that out. And so I'm going to hopefully share, and I promise this won't be too long. So hopefully if you saw the release notes, this is the first time that we actually had a link at the top that went to the blog post that was released simultaneously. And Hida wrote the majority of that, that hopefully gave that context for what's going on with this release, why it's important, why you should upgrade, how to upgrade, etc. So we would love your feedback if, your experience is different from others. If you're like, no, I'm fine. I got everything I got, like the way it is fine, or this is really helpful. It was worth putting in the extra effort to have the simultaneous blog post release. Or if you're like, I need something else, there's something else that I need. But we also have our Flux mailing list, etc. So help us out. You'll get an email afterwards. So, any kind of feedback you have, I've been sending out some emails. People have been emailing us back with their feedback, and, we're here to serve you. So please let us know what we can do better or differently. And if you maybe don't know how to do it, you could at least give us the feedback, and we'll keep experimenting to see what works for most people. And then also this online meetup, we definitely had people who said, oh, I'm pretty text-based, so I don't really need a meetup. But seeing how many people are here, it's also great to see that, yes, I know some people who are like, I just need a date and a time. We're going to sit through it. I'm going to go through the stuff, and I like to be more interactive. So this really is good feedback to see all the people who are here. So with that, we will go into the nuts and bolts of this release. And thanks again to Pinky for going through this. I will share the slide.
Thanks, Tomo. So yeah, sorry, I have a little bit of a thing, so I might be coughing a little, but I just wanted to say I did notice a couple of people that were new to Flux in the chat. And so this is probably not the best way to learn about Flux, but there are some really good talks out there that you can go watch that are just an intro to Flux. But I did want to give a really brief overview just so you're not confused. So Flux is a set of Kubernetes controllers that are installed onto your cluster, and then they each do a different thing. So there's the source controller, which is listening for your source, which could be Git, S3 bucket, whatever, OCI registry, and then it's pulling in the manifests it finds there. And then you have the customized controller, which applies them. You have the Helm controller, which does Helm releases. And then you have the notification controller, which handles inbound and outbound notifications. There's a couple of other controllers. I'm going to skip them because they're a little bit more high level, but I just wanted to give a really, really brief overview so you're not super confused about the things that we're talking about. Okay, so moving on. Flux 2.2 is a major breakthrough for the Flux team. And the Flux team has managed to solve many issues around Helm operations. And it is the first release that comes with official benchmarking. And we have a benchmark set on GitHub, which is public. And you can find that as, here, I'm going to send the link to, just in case anyone's curious about it. And so that's the link to the repo. It's flux-benchmark on GitHub. And so starting with this release, we are going to actually be publishing benchmark results for each minor release. And these releases happen at least 3 times per year after each Kubernetes minor. And already there was a patch release done. So there's 2.2.1 is the most recent. And this version was tested with the latest Kubernetes release and extends Flux support to Kubernetes 1.29. So the benchmark work is trying to measure the mean time to production. It's a measurement of 2 types of operations. Source acquiring, so how long does Flux take connecting to a container registry and pulling from there either Flux OCI artifacts or Helm charts, which are also OCI artifacts. And it does reruns of this benchmark with 100 Helm releases, 100 Helm charts, 100 Flux artifacts. Then it does the same thing with 500 and then 1,000 as well. And it gives you those statistics and those results. And so the idea behind this benchmark is that we want to see what happens when someone has a huge cluster with potentially tens of thousands of applications. We have users that are doing many large parallel deployments, and we wanted to push Flux really hard to say how fast can it deliver 1,000 new Helm charts from the registry up to the Helm release install and upgrade in the cluster. So it measures the time it takes Flux to acquire the sources, verify them, and then the time it takes Flux to reconcile the cluster state and deploy all these applications as well. And the results are really good. We're really proud. Huge improvements have been made to the Helm controller to achieve these kinds of numbers. The customized controller was doing pretty good even before, but we found major issues in terms of memory usage, and we shipped in 2.2 an optimization where the customized controller can basically do all of that with 100 megabytes of memory instead of 2 or 3 gigabytes that it would have needed before. And also the Helm controller is now under 1 gigabyte for 1,000 Helm upgrades in parallel as well. In terms of performance, Flux is in a really great place with 2.2. the need for sharding is actually becoming less and less an issue right now. And sharding is kind of more about multi-tenancy isolation if you don't trust Kubernetes RBAC or so on. And a single Flux instance can now deal with tens of thousands of apps on a single cluster. So we're very proud of that. In the Helm controller, besides improving how Helm operations are made and making huge optimizations to the Helm SDK in terms of memory usage, we have also solved some longstanding issues that were quite impactful, especially at scale, when you have many clusters or many releases. So there was like a situation where if, for example, the node where the Helm controller was running was crashing, when the Helm controller was trying to perform an upgrade, that particular Helm release or Helm releases would have been stuck forever. You had to do, some manual stuff like deleting the Helm storage or deleting the release or suspending and unsuspending. It was a whole mess. So in 2.2, when the Helm controller recovers, so if it spins up on a new node or whatever happens to it, it detects all the Helm releases which are left in a lock state, and it will actually unlock them. And according to whatever the specification is set, it's let's say like the Helm release has retries enabled or continuously upgrade or whatever, it will actually rerun, automatically recover any Helm releases from that state. Also, even if people run Helm commands like Helm upgrade in parallel with the Helm controller, which in the past would have caused kind of a messy situation, the Helm controller can now detect that and it will undo it and will move forward and do a proper upgrade as it should. It's also been tested in many different situations, and we're quite confident that there's no situation we've seen so far where you need to go out of Git and do some manual intervention anymore to recover from a Helm controller error. It's done all automatically now. And so this was a really big thing that was fixed. It's been asked for a lot. Another improvement around Helm is that now you can enable drift detection and optionally correction as well on a per Helm release basis. So now in the Helm release version v2 beta 2 API, you have an optional field where you can say, yes, I want to enable drift detection, and you can now add ignore rules for certain fields. So what that means is that if you have something in your Helm chart that deploys things, then there is a controller or something else which modifies some fields. So the Helm controller does drift detection, and it's enabled. So it will roll. Sorry. So it will roll back those changes immediately. And for some things you don't really want that. So let's say for charts with like lifecycle hooks or cluster resources like horizontal and vertical pod autoscalers, the controllers may write updates back into their own spec, and those updates would always be considered as drift by the Helm controller unless the resource was specified to be ignored in full. So for these types of situations, you can tell the Helm controller to ignore certain fields, and you can say target deployment spec.replica ignore, and it will skip that field. So that doesn't mean if you do an upgrade of the chart, that field will be ignored, because we have no control over the upgrade procedure. That is done by the Helm SDK, and it's done in the same manner as you would run a Helm upgrade from the CLI. Another thing that we've been fighting with is that Helm does not know how to patch custom resources. So if you have a custom resource in your Helm chart, what Helm does with it is if you update it in cluster, it'll skip it. If you update it in the Helm chart, or it will override the whole thing. So when we saw a drift detection, we couldn't actually run a Helm upgrade. So instead of doing that, the Helm controller runs the drift correction in the same manner as the customized controller now. So as the customized controller does with server-side apply, and all the cool things that is developed in Flux. So the drift correction is a really solid implementation and solution that we have today. I saw the thank you for the fix in the chat. Is a really solid implementation and solution that we have today. And so lots of people have been waiting for this for 2 years or 3 years. So we were really happy to finally deliver that. Very excited about that. Other things that were shipped in 2.2 include an improvement to running jobs with Flux customizations. So we have a way of doing pre-deployment jobs and post-deployment jobs with Flux with no Helm, just pure customize and YAMLs. There's a guide on that, actually, if you're interested in that. And a lot of people have been using it. For example, like you do a database migration or something, then you deploy your app, then you run tests and so on. And basically you have directories with the jobs that are doing stuff before the deployment, and after the deployment. And the issue with this feature that we have for a long time is that how Kubernetes garbage collection works. When you recreate a job, it leaves all the pods behind. they're not running, but they can build up. If you have tens of thousands of releases, you end up with stale pods belonging to some jobs, which are no longer there in etcd. You can see them when you do kube control get, and it can put a lot of pressure on your cluster. And we have users that were in this situation, and they had to run a different job to do the cleanup. And it was pretty complicated. And so this version has what we've shipped in this version is an improvement to the Flux customized controller garbage collection. So the garbage collector detects that it has deleted the job, and that Kubernetes has left all these pods in there, and it goes and cleans them up on its own. So it's a good improvement for those that are not relying on Helm to run all these things, if they want to deal with YAMLs and not mess with Helm. Another improvement is a feature where the customized controller can now restore the cluster state after you do edits on the cluster with something else other than kube control. And the thing being fixed is, if, let's say, you use something like Lens or K9s as an editor, and you mess up your production cluster, it doesn't work the same way as kube control. It has its own manager name, and you can mess up the cluster kind of bad. We've seen some cases. And so the problem was that Flux was not able to undo those changes. It just merges the Git state, and it becomes really messy. And you'll have no idea what changes went where, and so on. And so now we have a new flag in the customized controller. And when you, as a cluster admin, you can install it, and you can configure the K9s or Lens field manager name. You can set field managers that are disallowed from making changes on the cluster. And what will happen is, like, now by default, Flux undoes all the kube control edits, and it will also do the same stuff with edits made by Lens or K9s or any other editor that people are using. The only thing that you need to do to figure it out is to figure out what the field manager is, and then you can set up that configuration with Flux. Major improvements have been made around integration with Cosign for OCI repository and Helm charts. There was actually a talk at KubeCon about this as well. And that feature is about the possibility of verifying the identity of the keyless signatures when Flux pulls these artifacts from the container registry. So now you can say, not only do I want the Helm chart to be signed, but you can say, I want the Helm chart to be signed by this authority from this repo by this GitHub action, which allows you to do very strict policies on what entities you allow to change your cluster state. So now we got Cosign keyless signature on par with OpenPGP, where you can actually specify exact identities when you use the verification. And there are two optional fields in the OCI repo and the Helm chart template, which is called match OIDC identity. It has a subject and an issuer, and you can write a regex expression, or you can put the whole string of the subject and issuer to verify that as well. And so with this, we've kind of, covered the features we wanted for Cosign. And next year, we're going to try to ship Notary in Q1 as the second implementation for verifications as well. And so another thing is that we now have Flux Bootstrap command working with Gitea servers, either the self-hosted or the hosted version. It has full coverage in Flux now. It can do Bootstrap. It can also do webhooks for Gitea. It can also have receivers, and so on. It has full support in the same way we have had support for GitHub and GitLab as well. And we also completed the Bitbucket server and data center implementation. So Flux Bootstrap knows how to do that for Bitbucket data center as well. But we didn't have support for commit status updates, and we had it only for Bitbucket Cloud. So now it's finalized for the data center and server implementation, and we can also do commit status updates from the notification controller as well. We have also added safeguards to both Flux install and Flux upgrade. We were seeing some issues where people were getting themselves in messy situations because it would let you try to do a Flux install over something that's bootstrapped. So now if you try to do a Flux install over a cluster that is bootstrapped, is for those that don't know Flux, that is what that means is basically that's a way to install Flux onto your cluster. And the issue there is that it's actually pulling from Git. When you run the bootstrap command, it puts all the Flux files into Git and then manages itself that way. So now if you try to do a Flux install over a cluster that is bootstrapped, the Flux install command will actually halt and ask you, do you really want to do this? You have already bootstrapped in the past. This is the version that's on, and so on. And so this will prevent hopefully any accidents that could mess up the cluster in the future. Another thing alongside that is when you do Flux version or Flux check, the CLI commands, those are CLI commands. We now show you the version installed on the cluster, and we also tell you if the cluster was bootstrapped or not. So trying to add a lot of safeguards around those issues. Another thing on the Flux CLI around Helm releases, if you change something in the Helm release in the values Helm controller, in the values part of the Helm release, the Helm controller does the upgrade and the upgrade fails. The changes that you did are like for some reason are wrong, or the new chart is not backwards compatible and it fails. There was no way of retrying that operation in the past unless you went to Git and changed some values or made a change and basically forced it. And so the Helm release can fail due to various reasons, such as maybe you don't have enough capacity in your cluster for the rollout to happen at the time. And so you'll see the Helm controller that fails and sets the Helm release to a failed state. And even if the capacity is increased, there was no way of telling the Helm controller, hey, please go retry this without having to change the configuration. So we have added a CLI command and an annotation as well that you can add. So you can do it both with the Flux CLI or directly in Git by adding an annotation to the Helm release. No changes to the values or the chart itself, and we have 2 flags. Flux reconcile, so the CLI command, is Flux reconcile Helm release -- force. And what force will do is annotate the Helm release, which tells the Helm controller, even if it failed, even if it reached max retries, try it one more time. In the Helm release, you have retries that you can set that tell the Helm controller how many times it should retry that operation. And let's say you have set the retries to 3, and usually it works, but for some reason it got to the maximum retries and it can't move forward anymore, and something happens in your cluster and you wish to reset those retries without changing the configuration again. We now have a -- reset flag for the reconcile command, which sets an annotation. So it can also be done through Git. And it tells the Helm controller to reset the count of retries back to 0 and do all the retries again. There are a few more features as well, such as we have made some changes to the alert and provider API, and those APIs have been promoted from v1 beta 2 to v1 beta 3. And you can read more about those fixes as well in the documentation. And I really recommend reading that blog that Hide wrote as well. It's got a lot of good information that I hit on some, topics on there, but I think there's even more information there. So I think that's a really good resource for you to check out as well if you want more information there. But that is all the updates I wanted to share very quickly in a nutshell. And so yeah, now I'm curious if there are any questions.
Was awesome. And Hide, by the way, is been able to join in the background. So if anybody has any,
hopefully I did him proud.
Give people a minute. All right. Well, while we're waiting, hopefully Pinky's presentation was so clear and very understandable. So maybe you don't have any questions. While we're waiting, if any of you do, just so you know, another thing we notice is we meet tons of people who say, oh, love Flux, thanks so much. It's such a lifesaver. And when I ask, oh, have you given us a star? And they go, oh, I hadn't even thought of that, or I don't really spend much time in GitHub. So if you can, just take a moment and go to the Flux 2 repo and please do give us a star. It does matter with the CNCF. Of course, our website, fluxcd.io, from which you can see all the information for upcoming events, how to join our Slack channel where most of us live, and how you can get help. And like I said, please let us know any way that you have feedback on how you'd like to get information and what kind of information would help, especially around releases. But if there's any other kind of information that you need or want, and you have particular formats that you like, please let us know, because we are dedicated to making sure that you have a great user experience. So if not, again, it was really great to see such a large crowd and see a lot of familiar names, especially many of you who we've been chatting with recently. And again, we do these Flux maintainer meetings. It's usually Kingdon and me, and we just love to hear how people discovered Flux, what needs you have. And sometimes people just come with a bunch of troubleshooting they need, and we dive right in. So whatever you need is great there. And then we have feedback. Yes, no questions. Presentation was clear. Looking forward to seeing these improvements to work with Helm and Customized Controller. Excellent. Well, thank you so much then. Thank you again, Pinky. And I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday. Stay warm, stay safe. And we will see you with more exciting Flux news in the coming year. So thanks for joining us for this wonderful, great release at the end of this year. See you. Thanks.
Thank you.